Welcome to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Markle. I am a curriculum development specialist here at NCBRT, and I work in collaboration with subject matter experts to create valuable and timely training for the responder community. The National Center for Biomedical Research and Training provides mobile training to both the national and international emergency response community. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're joined by Maggie Varela, Mark DuPont, and Andrew Rateaver for a leadership roundtable discussion. So if you haven't listened to their individual episodes on leadership, I highly recommend going back and listening to those. So today, we're going to have a roundtable discussion about some leadership challenges. But before we do that, I'm going to have these three go around and give a little bit of an introduction. We have heard from them before, so they're not new faces. Maggie, do you want to start us off?
Oh, thank you, Ashley. And my name is Maggie Varela. I'm retired with the Miami-Dade Police Department, which is Miami-Dade County Sheriff's Office. After 24 years, during my time there, I, of course, started like everyone else. I did road patrol. I did investigations, I did some community relations, and then my last 10 years when I got newly promoted to lieutenant, unfortunately, September 11 happened. My agency was wise enough to identify that they needed their own counterterrorism division, so they started their Homeland Security Bureau. I was asked to come in and help them develop that bureau along with the Southeast Florida Fusion Center, and I actually ended my career 10 years there. So my subject matter expertise is Homeland Security and criminal intelligence. So during that time, I was the criminal intelligence lieutenant. I also worked with our tech support and also with our joint terrorism task force. So it was a learning experience for me, but it was a great opportunity for me to learn and identify how important it is for us to work together to stop any kind of active threat or terrorism to occur in our jurisdiction. So thank you for having me, Ashley.
Thank you. Mark, take it away.
No, I'll just follow Maggie. That was a good intro. I'll just, whatever she says. Yeah, we'll just go with whatever she says. I'm Mark DuPont. I did 27 years of service in the United States Coast Guard, went on to become the Chief Intelligence and Domestic Security Officer for the state of Florida, for the largest conservation law enforcement agency in the world. Went from there to be the Director of Boat Operations and Training for all 50 states and 6 territories through the National Association of State Boating Law Administrators. Currently, I act as the Executive Director for the National Maritime Law Enforcement Academy. And I've been with NCBRT since 2017. And I love the opportunity to do exactly what we're going to do for the next few minutes at least and have these types of conversations, because one of the things about NCBRT that I really enjoy is a really wealth of great minds that are brought together through our instructor cadre, and we have a couple of them here. I don't know how I made it into the fold, but anyway, but it's just a great experience to have people with such diverse experiences in organizations all throughout the country. So I think we can have a great conversation today when we talk about leadership.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Andrew.
Hey, hello, everybody. Ashley, thank you. Mark, I think you hit it right on the head. That's we working with some great people here, and I'm certainly honored to be with both of you today and with you, Ashley, on this forum about leadership. I'm Andrew Rateaver. I go by Rat, my nickname from my first 3 letters of the last name there. Been with NCBRT since 2016 and have been with the City of Berkeley Police Department here in California for the last 33 years of service. I retired in 2018 and was a reserve deputy sheriff for our local county, as well as being a member, a team leader and instructor with our search and rescue team here in the county. I've been doing that for close to 45 years now, and also spent some time as a wildland firefighter and currently as a volunteer, as a wilderness ranger with the U.S. Forest Service up in the Tahoe Sierra. Most of that time I'm doing fire prevention in the backcountry. my career is not as esteemed as Mark's or as detail-oriented as Maggie's. Most of my time I spent trying to get out of the office, and because I wasn't smart enough to be as administratively tactful as perhaps those two. But I had an opportunity to lead several mobile field forces and mutual aid teams in not only crowd control, crowd management situations for many of the incidents that we had out here on the West Coast, but also to the fires, the large-scale fires, the wildland-urban interface incidents that we had here in the California area as well. So I've had a chance to be leading those teams, as well as when I was on the job full-time, be the SWAT team commander. So doing some high-risk things there, as well as the day-to-day things as well. So again, happy to be with you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So to kick off our conversation today, what do you see as some of the most significant leadership challenges facing public safety organizations today? And how do you think that they differ from challenges in the past?
Loaded question, as we've discussed when we were talking about doing this roundtable. And I think we could go on for hours. But if I had to kind of narrow it down to a couple of primary things, I think the number one challenge in public safety today is what I call the 4 R's. And I'm from Boston, so my R's don't sound right. My accent might come through there, but it's retirements, it's retention, it's recruitment, and last but not least, which is really having an impact on public safety, is reskilling. People came to work to do one thing. What they're doing is changing and evolving, and being able to reskill them is obviously a challenge as you look at it from a leadership perspective. I think the second most important challenge, this is just my opinion, and it's relative to a course we're actually developing at NCBRT, is wellness. Research is showing us that public safety professionals have a reduced life expectancy significantly, about 22 years less than the average male or female. We have obesity and fitness issues amongst our public safety professionals. We have fatigue, we have burnout, we have increased injuries, we have increased mishaps. This is happening over the last 5 to 10 years. We have excessive use of leave, because people are getting burnt out, people are getting injured. We have post-traumatic stress disorder, and last but not least, and the one that's really the scariest, is suicides. Mm-hmm. The professional in law enforcement has a 56% greater chance or likelihood of committing suicide than the average citizen. So to me, as a person sitting in the colonel seat or the chief seat or the commissioner seat, those two things are what I call the perfect storm. There's a lot on my plate that I have to focus on, and interestingly enough, it's all about the people. Notice I didn't say anything too much about the job there.
Exactly, Mark. I think you're exactly right. Yeah. Everything you mentioned there is people oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm sure you guys have perspectives.
Well, no, I think it's great that you brought up the point of wellness, because as we all know, no matter what industry you're in, if your personnel are not happy, if they don't feel they're valued, if they don't feel like they're bringing something to the table, and that you're recognizing that, and that they feel healthy and happy in that environment, that they feel safe, right? Because that's one of the things about supporting your staff. You want to support them. You want to communicate with them. You want to make them feel that they can give you feedback without repercussions, so that's one of the other aspects as well. And when it comes to wellness in any kind of industry, especially in law enforcement, because we know that they have that challenge every day on the outside. They have that challenge of they might, get hurt, they might get killed, they may, anything could really possibly happen to them. So the leadership's job is, okay, how can I make them feel safe and sound and heard and supported from the inside out, so then they can better do their job out in the community, and then they can feel open to work with the community and feel more comfortable and what skills. And I love that you mentioned the part about reskilling, because we have such a young force out there. Not I don't mean young in just age, but in experience, because we've had so many people leave that you have, the kind of like, I hate to say it, the blind leading the blind, right? You have officers that are fairly young, like 2-3 years on, and they're the field training officers or they're the sergeants, so trying to get them the skills that they need, the mentorship that they need to build them up to be better leaders themselves. So as a main leader, that's one of the things that I would want to, how can I build up not just my current leaders under me, but all the way down to the patrol level and detective level.
Yeah, again, you guys are mentioning things that are truly important, and they involve our people, our staff, our crews, regardless whether it's law enforcement, fire service, EMS, or allied agencies. Those issues are all about people. Let me ask you this, though, and Ashley, if you don't mind. So do you think those issues tend to breed kind of an attitude of them versus us, meaning that we're under siege here? All those things that you mentioned are essentially working against us or challenges for personnel. If we have that much on our plate, do you think we lock arms, we should close ranks and think about us, never mind the community that we're serving? And I guess, Ashley, that's the point that I'm getting to, is that there are so many nowadays, so many external forces, so many external community concerns that they're coming in from all sides, whether it be public trust, whether it be funding, whether it be getting the tools needed in order just to do the job. And now let's not do that. Let's put the funding or the tools into some other program or whatever. So it's almost like the personnel are being robbed of something. So I'm wondering, does that set us up for an us versus them type of thing now?
Well, it's an interesting question, Rat, and let me ask you a question in retort. When we say us versus them, do we look at it, us, the agency, circle the wagons, protect ourselves from all those external influences like you're talking about? But I had an interesting thought when you said it, us versus them. That often I hear it, unfortunately, more than I'd like to hear it. The us versus them statement comes from leadership talking about the younger generation.
Yes, indeed.
And we have a very unique environment here that I don't think anybody was really prepared for, let alone the public safety community. But it's more accentuated in public safety because of the type of people that we recruit. But we have a situation for the first time in our history where we have 5 generations in the workplace. And things have just changed about how people view the world, how people want to succeed, what they consider to be most important in their life. Those things shift and adapt. Unfortunately, we, leadership, haven't. And we continue to do the things that we've been doing all along because that's the way we've been doing things all along. And that's the way I was trained. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard it, but hey, that's the way we did it when I went to the academy. So that's the way we're going to do it now.
That's the way it's always been done, right?
That's the way it's always been done, And you get these young people asking questions like, why do we do that? And that's the answer that they're getting. And Einstein, I think, was onto something when he said the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we are doing what we did as far as recruitment. We are doing what we did as far as retention, what we think is important and how we keep our people. We are doing what we thought was okay about the culture inside of our agencies and departments and divisions. We're doing all the same things, yet we're struggling to keep those people. We're struggling to recruit people, and we're seeing all those numbers that I talked about go up. So, again, insanity says we just keep going along. We really have to, and we're ahead of ourselves in our conversation here, but when you look at solutions begin by saying, wait a minute, let's step back at this and let's really take a pulse check on how we're doing things and what's going on. What is going on at the deck plate level? And my expression is, I tell people, I tell people I speak many languages. And I don't speak anything other than English. But when I say I speak many languages, it means I've worked at the federal level, I've worked at the state level, I've worked at the local level. Leaders have to speak multiple languages and be able to talk to those 5 different generations. They have to talk multiple languages when they go outside the walls of their organization and talk to the community. When you talked about us against them, Rat, this is where that applies,
Right.
and we need to understand what that perspective is. It may not be the right one, but it's what they have and what they believe. So how do we communicate with those different cultures that are out there with different perspectives? And I think the same thing happens within.
I think that's a great point. I think in the past, we may have taken it for granted that, those 5 things, those 4 R's are there already. We don't have to work as hard. Nowadays, I think today's leaders have to take all that into consideration. And as you suggest, take the time to listen to all sides and put a plan into place. That's the effective leadership.
And Rad, I love that you brought to the forefront the community, because the bottom line is, at least everyone that I know that ever wanted to go in law enforcement, right? We want to go in because we want to make a difference. We want to make a change.
Right.
We want to help. We want to save. We want to be like the heroes, right? So if we don't bring that community like full circle and build that trust and that relationship with that community, that kind of like deters that whole mission of you trying to make a difference. Because unfortunately, it does end up being that instead of just within our own agency, but with the community, is it us against them? Or is it us working with them? Let's work with them to make a better community. And then, of course, the officers hopefully will feel a little bit more fulfilled. They'll feel more appreciated. They'll feel that the community wants them to be a part of what they're doing, as opposed to, always being looked at as shunned. Oh, the cops are here, and negative connotation, instead of how can we work together to make our community better? So I think that kind of like is a holistic look at how to make individuals within the unit or within the agency want to work harder and want to stay and want to continue fighting that great mission that they're doing, and at the same time bringing the community closer to us. So it's double.
I wholeheartedly agree, but it takes a leader to step forward or step back and say, are we working with the community we serve? How can we do it better?
Well, that relationship with the community starts solving my retention issues, starts solving my recruitment issues, starts solving my diversity issues. So, when you ask, where do you begin? Well, what is your relationship with your people? And I say your people meaning inside and outside. What's your relationship? What's your awareness? I'm sure you've had experiences with leaders like this or have talked to leaders like this. They sit in that seat way above the fray and may claim that they know what's going on at the deck plate level or the boots on the ground level. But when you actually ask them, I like using Cooper's color code. This is my challenge when talking to some of these leaders, because many are familiar, especially in law enforcement. For those that may not know, Cooper was a Marine Corps colonel, and he came up with this means of assessing, if you will, your own preparedness. And his codes were white, yellow, orange, red, and black. And white was, you're totally unaware. You're just clueless as to, what might be going on around you. And again, if I didn't say this, about situational awareness. White, you're totally unaware of what's going on. Yellow, you're aware. You're squared away. You've got your whole game intact, and you're ready to react to whatever a potential threat may be. Orange is you're alert. You're seeing something that may be of great concern. And red is, your alarms are going off. This is really bad. I've got to deal with this. And black being, total panic. And my point is, to continue the conversation when I'm talking to leaders, is what is your assessment of your people using Cooper's color code? Now, what that requires is a level of awareness. You know, well, how do I do that? How would I know? And I try to equate it, especially as it relates to their wellness. How well are your people? And that requires a level of awareness that sometimes leaders don't have. They haven't. The expression is another expression I use is walk the manufacturing floor. That's an old expression from when we were a big industrial in our industrial age. And you know, if you want to be a CEO of a company and really lead your company into the future, you need to walk the floor to see how is it getting done. What's going on there that I need to adapt to, rather than just keeping my blinders on and always looking downrange, thinking that that's where I need to keep my focus. What's going on right here? What do I need to be aware of in here?
And walking the floor and then talking to your people, Mark. I think that's one thing that you think about is like, okay, how can I engage with my people? How can I get them to feel comfortable to talk to me? Because you may be walking the floor, but if you're one of these that they're known as one of those leaders that are not approachable, that, you know, that it's all about them, it's my way or the highway, they're not going to feel comfortable to share anything with you or even their, you know, chain of command. So that's a really good point, is trying to have that leadership that's not only there in the depths of it, but also open and honest that, hey, you can talk to me. It's not just all about me, right? So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, if this is the first time you showed up at roll call, nobody's going to be talking about anything. Right? They're going to be like, why is the boss here? You know, something's bad. Either someone's getting an award or someone's getting fired, you know.
Exactly.
But if it's a regular occurrence, if you go out on patrol with them on a regular, you know, they can pretty much set their clocks to it that, you know, about once a month you come out and you're doing that sort of thing. They're going to be a little bit more open to talking to you.
Oh, come now, Mark. I have an open door policy. You're welcome into my office anytime if I'm there.
Yeah. You know, we laugh at it because we've all heard it.
Sure.
We've all heard it. And the reality is that's not, you might say that's a nice slogan. That's a nice campaign speech. But how have you executed it? I had the pleasure of working for Admiral Allen, who was a former commandant of the Coast Guard. And one of the first things he did when he took command of the Coast Guard is he took off the doors in his office, took off all the doors in his, you know, you walked into an inner area where there was multiple, all the doors are coming off. You know, if we're going to say the doors are open, then let's not let them be shut. And the other thing is he had no chairs in his office. But
keeps meetings short.
Exactly. But yeah, you're right, Rat. You know, rather than say it, how do you do it? How do you make people really feel that that's what the culture is? And it goes back to wellness. All right. So there is a stigma attached to someone who is suffering from some post-traumatic stress and or some mental health challenges, especially in law enforcement, but throughout public safety. I'm talking all the way to the dispatchers. There's a stigma to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some help. And part of that is because the culture within has not been changed. We don't adopt the same mindset to their mental health as we do their physical health. You'll go into departments and we'll say, you know, we allow the officers to go work out half hour before shift or after shift or whatever. You know, we make that happen. Yep, that's good. Well, what do we do to support their mental health? And do all of a sudden now we think less of that person because they've raised their hand and said, hey, this thing that I listen to over the radio if I'm talking to a dispatcher, or this call that I responded to as a firefighter, had a significant impact. And usually the ones that make the significant impact are not the ones you think they are. You know, they're not because there's some other thing that connects to their experiences or their life or their loved ones. And we need to open that door, pun intended, we're talking about open doors, right? We need to open that door wide and allow that to happen without the stigma, which requires me as a leader to say, we need to change our culture. We need to take that stigma away. And that can't be a slogan. That can't be, can't be a poster up on a board and that's all we do, which goes back to how connected am I as a leader? Can I read what the Cooper's color code is on this officer that I'm riding with today? How is his well-being? And if there's help that's needed, do I provide enough support through our organization?
That's a good point. And also that's where I think that servant leadership comes in, right? You want to really try and understand what your people's needs. I mean, in our classes, we always tell people, what do we tell people, Mark, when we start the classes? The WIFM, and everybody goes, hey, what's the WIFM? What's in it for me, right?
Right.
And in this case, it's the same thing. It's like, what's in it for our staff? What can I do to make them feel valued? What can I do to make them feel comfortable? How can I change that culture of helping them feel comfortable in coming and talk to me? And if not me, to some other, level supervisor. Maybe it's not the direct leader, but maybe it's their direct leader. And also, how are we impacting those direct leaders? How are we preparing them to be leaders? Because that's one thing, I don't know if you all, when we became sergeants, we have a 2-week class for all supervisors, right? And we go to the 2-week class, and all it is administrative paperwork and what you need to do if someone, files a complaint or if an officer gets in trouble or all that. And I'm like, wait a minute. How am I supposed to apply this to actually trying to mentor my guys, to make them better, to help them, to guide them, to teach them in the ways of the agency? How is that helping me? And it was I was kind of laughed at, oh, come on, man, you're too emotional, And at that time, that was the culture. It was no, it's all about, black and white. So those are the changes that we really need to make when it comes to being supportive to our staff so that they feel comfortable opening up. Because I don't know that they do right now.
Yeah, and I think that you made a good point, both of you. Someone listening to this might say, that all sounds good, but I'm a department with 3,000 officers. And that's okay for the sheriff that has 20 deputies, but it's not going to work for me. I'm not going to be able to connect with all 3,000. I get that. But this is where ICS comes into play, the same mentality, right? Span of control. So what, to your point, Maggie, how am I empowering my direct reports to forward this culture? What am I challenging them to do? What am I supporting them to do? What am I asking them to do? And how is that trickling down to the lieutenants and to the sergeants and getting to and I don't know, just me, but I'm going to still make sure somehow, some way I'm getting down to that manufacturing floor. I'm not going to do it as frequently. I'm not riding with all 3,000, but I got to just take a pulse and see what's going on out there. And hopefully what I'm hearing and the interpretation I'm getting from my reports is the same. Hopefully, but if there's a gap there, I want to know what it is and make sure that we all collectively can close that gap.
Yeah. It's interesting that we've been talking about the different generations, and certain generations are more tech savvy than perhaps the three of us.
Speak for yourself, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I take
for the two of
offense.
Okay, one of us. Notice I'm wearing these, right? So you have 5 in your department. You have 5,000 in your department, Mark. Use the technology. There's a lot of different platforms out there now. Whether it be the internet or apps. I know there's some apps out there that even with some of the platforms that advertised on Police One, you can get an own individual app for your agency. It's set up, and standardized, but your own agency can communicate on this app. And it's a great example of ways to keep in touch, and a way that a leader who's got far more subordinates than perhaps he or she can ride around with, they can visit and communicate on an app. So
yeah, all
good challenges for the leader.
Yeah, and the newer generations are gonna love that, because that's what they're used to. That's what they like.
Yep.
It's there's solutions out there, and it's a cop out to say. You mentioned generational rat. It's a cop out to say, "Oh, this generation doesn't get it." That type of thing, or we have everything that we need, and They just need to know how to work it and use it. And there's a big disconnect there. You may think in your eyes and your viewpoint, but let's go back to those 5 different generational segments that are working for you. Their perspectives are different. They just might see things a little bit different. And what's important to one generation might not be as important to another generation. We talk about jokingly and about technology and which generation might be better at that. Every generation has unique capabilities that are good in the holistic, your words, Maggie, in the holistic application of running our agency. There's a place for everyone, and I need every one of them to do things. I just need to recognize they're not all going to look like me. They're not all going to act like me. They're not all going to see it exactly the way I am. And I need to understand, this is that multilingual thing. I need to understand what that perspective is from them so that I realize, oh, I never thought of that. I never looked at things that way, but I understand that it's important. And I understand as an agency, we ought to be looking at that. Of course, everybody's going to have their own personal opinion. But, I like to say, if Rat, if you tell me something, that's your opinion. If Rat and Maggie tell me something, now it's starting to be a little bit of a rumor. If Rat, Maggie, and Ashley start telling me something, now there's something that maybe I need to look at because this is gaining some momentum. There's a commonality that I'm hearing, and I'm hearing it from 3 different types of people. They're in different workplaces. They're different generations, male and female. I'm getting this viewpoint from multiple angles, and they're all coming to the same conclusion. I ought to look at this as opposed to just ignoring that. And how did I get that? I'm connected. I'm aware. I'm aware of what my own shortcomings may be, my lack of understanding in certain areas, but I've got that situational awareness. I've also got that domain awareness. And so I'm staying connected to that. Doesn't mean that just because I have it, I've got the solution to anything, but I've got enough people around me to pull them in and say, hey, Rat, you brought up a really good point, and I need your help fixing this for our agency. What would you recommend? And again, you start just getting, it's like the take-home police vehicle. When we shared vehicles, when we turned it in, there was dirt in it. There was wrappers from fast food stores and things like that. But when it became our take-home vehicle, we took care of it.
Yeah,
it wasn't a rental. It was ownership. Exactly right. And so if my people are if I'm asking for your help in designing what the solution is, if I want your help in designing a wellness program for agency X, I've got buy-in and I've got an ambassador that's going to go out there and talk to his or her peers about what this thing is or isn't. And that displays some of the rumors, that displays some of the misconceptions, because one of the essential elements of leadership is communication. And how I communicate and how I use my people and all the resources I have to communicate helps make sure that communication gets through. Some people might not agree with it, but at least we're communicating what our intent is and what we're trying to achieve.
And on
That's
those
a ton
same
of
lines,
stuff.
go ahead.
Yeah, that's a ton of stuff. Sorry, I went on a rant. I went on.
No, but it's funny because on that same rumor type mill, one of the things that I think, and I learned that actually in criminal intel, one of the things that I learned is that lack of communication or no communication or lack of transparency or no information leads to misinformation. And that's not only with your staff and your personnel, but even with the community. If you don't give information out there, of course, there's some things that you can't provide if it's an active investigation, but whatever information you can't give out, one of the things we tell people, if it's your people, share it, share the information, because they're going to hear it from someone else. Someone else is going to put in their version of that truth, right, of that untruth. Why not bring out that information and share that information so there aren't those rumors that are just going around? Just share that information, and transparency, I think, is really important as a leadership.
And I think the one commonality in all of our discussion just now is that the leader has to lead. The leader has to be aware, and the leader has to lead. So, Ashley, you asked the question. That was probably a long way to answer it, but we'll toss it back to you now.
Yeah. Do you see how I said from the beginning, we can go a lot of different ways with this. There's a lot connected to it, and it's not It's not a simple answer,
Mm-hmm.
but it actually is. Does that make
Yeah.
any sense?
Yeah.
There's a
Absolutely.
lot to it, but if you really boil it down to its simplicity, leadership and the tenets of leadership have been the same for hundreds of years.
Mhm.
The how we do it has changed, but the tenets of accountability, the tenets of transparency, the tenets of communication, the tenets of awareness, that's the same. It's just the how and there's some complexities now, but I think it's all the same.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like y'all really encapsulated that conversation really well. So thank you for joining us for this series. And next time we'll go into some of the solutions to these leadership challenges. So make sure to check back for that. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week.
If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, please send us an email at podcast@ncbrt.lsu.edu. Make sure you subscribe to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.